Board members, we will go to agenda item 8, unfinished board business. And if you remember, we had 2 consent items that were pulled from yesterday and carry over to today. What is before us right now is a motion was made by member Hart and seconded by member Booth that the board approve contract for USBE 250075CT primary class DBA Odyssey. So that is the motion before the board. I'm going to just ask, I know we had some questions. Scott, now that you're here with us, can you just give us some information before we take this vote? There were some concerns brought up, some questions that were asked, and maybe if you just take a minute and address this, that would be helpful.
Updates? Is that what you were implying there?
I don't know about update from last night to today, but you can, if you have a question, we'll let Scott go and then we can open it up for questions.
So as of note, my understanding is one of the requests was for us to address particular aspects of Odyssey's or the experience with Odyssey from other states. So I did provide an email response to that was actually a response of my inquiry of Odyssey related to those particular states. It was Idaho, Iowa, and Missouri. So subject to any questions and concerns about the email I sent to you that captured Odyssey's side of the response, or story, or and what was put out in the media related to those. I can move on to the next particular request or piece of information related to this contract. I sent it last night. I can't remember. It wasn't too late. It was around maybe 4 or 5 p.m. or yeah.
We'll see.
It was after. I mean, it was kind of in the evening. 6. Okay. All right. Acronyms, time. I don't know. So 6:39. Yes.
Okay.
So we may want to pause there, Chair, just so that anyone who hadn't seen it yet can see those responses that were made. I think what that does is demonstrates to you our due diligence in ensuring that those questions were addressed as part of the overall procurement process and selection of who's in front of you today.
Thank you. I'll ask member Booth, have you read the responses, member Booth? Okay, if he's read them and still has a question, we'll move forward. I know others are kind of reading / listening, so member Booth.
I appreciated all of that additional information, Scott. Thank you very much. I did want to just articulate in written form, which I sent to you and to members of the Finance Committee and our leadership, just what was given to me by state of Idaho individuals in addition to what you mentioned. And I don't say it I don't share it as a means of, well, we shouldn't go with Odyssey. I'm just saying we want to be clear-headed, be open about it, make sure that the contract and your negotiations with Mr. Connors, the president of Odyssey, that all of this information that may have to be taken with a grain of salt. I've heard different things from the governor's office, different things from the Department of Education for the state, different things from the specific individual who was the interfacer for the state of Idaho with specifically the Odyssey people. And they were the first state. And so they were building the plane, as I've used their example, mid-flight. And it got a lot better, but they still ended up going with someone else. So as we have determined, and you have determined that this is the best option, I am totally supportive, just wanting to make sure that we're upfront with Odyssey so that as you progress through the process of working with them, that there are not surprises, and that you are able to communicate and they are willing to communicate and to fix. So I specifically said, um, I listed, which I don't need to go over in detail here, specific things that were mentioned by people from the state of Idaho, and Odyssey didn't choose to say that. Of course, they're not going to. That's that we're not going to hang out our dirty laundry. But those are things just to kind of put in your brain to watch for as they are taking over on the 15th of May. And the guy from the governor's office specifically said, I think the problems we had with Odyssey were 50% Odyssey, 50% State Office of Education. So I have high hopes, knowing you and knowing the people that represent our Utah State Office of Education, that the communication is going to take place. So it's not going to be a matter of, well, we didn't tell Odyssey what we needed, or that we needed the transparency and the accountability, and we needed, the records to be up to date and accurate. There's the question about the interest on the 120 million in Idaho. They didn't clarify that, and so they didn't know that they were needing to give the interest back to the state of Idaho. And then when it was clarified that yes, they did need to do that, then there was a bunch of questions. And so those kinds of things, I believe, can be overcome, and I think they can provide a tremendous service for us. But I just wanted to be upfront in terms of what I was hearing, so I wasn't feeling, if we had problems down the road, I wasn't feeling like, oh, well, we didn't go into this with our eyes wide open. So I have high hopes for a great program, empowering parents to do the things they want to do for their kids. I just wanted to have that in front of you, that those of you that will be following through on the implementation. This is a huge responsibility for you guys. I'm sorry that you just get to add it to your list of things to do without a whole lot of help. One other concern that was mentioned was that in the state of Idaho, they did have an interface person, but that person was also responsible for 4 other states. Now, Idaho was much, much smaller than us in terms of the amount of money to be distributed and awarded. So I'm hoping that whoever they designate is somebody that can really address our needs and not make us number 4 or 5 on the list when you've got a problem that needs to be situated. So those are just cautions, and I am going to be supportive of this recommendation. Just wanted to get that out in the public. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Member Booth.
Sheriff,
Member Fogg. Yeah, go ahead.
So a couple of key takeaways that can segue your direction, Chair, to respond to board member. Absolutely. I do want to emphasize that you can see that what's different about this particular contract is typically we enter into a 5-year agreement with renewals, right? From there, this is a 2-year contract, and obviously they've agreed to. The reason for that is because of the complexity of these programs, and because we want to follow the legislative law or intent for the program. Well, we have to. It's the law. We're the contracting entity. What's a lot of is emphasized in here, though, is that the vendor, or should you vote to approve the contract, and then I would subsequently sign it, has really a majority of the responsibility for the success or failure of this program. Our role is just to ensure that they meet the contractual obligation to meet the law and to provide all of the programmatic definitions and policies and procedural aspects. That's why you see references to the handbook that they have to publish, and to bring that further clarity to our parents, who we respect and admire and the parents lead choice and do those types of things, that it's made abundantly clear to them by the vendor, not by the government, not by the board, so to speak, or whatever terms are out there, but that our role is just as the contracting entity. And should there be, subsequent concerns with, are they following the contract, then absolutely, or meeting the law. And then by not doing so, absolutely, we would, I think we would have that good relationship. We certainly had that with the prior vendor as well. So, and to the questions or concerns about it wouldn't have mattered who the vendor was or is at that time, because of the amount of the change is that were required by the new law that were HB 455. It is highly probable that we would have done the same thing. It wasn't about a particular thing. There's, to terminate for, that's why we have that clause in there, is because it's at our convenience to make sure that everybody too, because again, which was emphasized yesterday, the previous vendor had the opportunity to reapply as well. And I'm a little disappointed that they didn't, but that's their choice. So we do it. We feel, or I feel strongly, that having this as a 2-year contract, which you can see that the vendor has agreed to, allows us that opportunity to relook at things, not from a critical point of the vendor or anything like that, but due to the complexity of this program. It is a difficult task in any state, not just our state, but you can see that when programs first start up, those types of things, that there can be these types of challenges out there. So what do? We maybe need to reset or relook at things and do that. And that's why we've are proposing to you that you approve my signature on the contract for a 2-year contract with options to renew, but it will come up again for review in 2 years. We are also very, very conscientious about where things are at in the legal system. And we feel that the contract facilitates and can be adapted to whatever is decided eventually in the court system. I think that was another question or concern. The wording in there, you can see quite a bit of clarity and specificity on how much we're emphasizing the role of the vendor in administering and meeting the intent of this program as put out in HB 455, which resulted in the applicable codes. So does that help, Chair? So
We're getting a slight head nod. So we're going to say yes. We're going to go member Bogus, and then member Earl, and then member Hall.
Thank you, sir. Superintendent Jones, I'm wondering if there's anywhere in this contract that addresses the interest on that $120 million. It's been brought up multiple times, but I don't have a clear recollection.
Yes. So Chair, the answer is yes. That'll all be subsequent to the transfer and thing. And we've already put the motions in, or the processes in place for the return of the funding and calculations and those aspects too. So I don't have the exact amounts or those pieces, but yes, we're addressing that. Not so much as part of this contract because it's with a new vendor, but with the transfer from the former vendor to that, and the money will be brought back. Yes. Does that answer her question?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's because that contract would be related to the previous vendor on the processes for return of the funding. So
I guess it doesn't
Thank
answer
you.
my question then.
It does not?
No, I don't believe so.
okay.
So this interest question has come up and I got a text message about it, but I don't recall reading it in the contract that if there is interest when this money is transferred to Odyssey, that either we reduce the money we send to them for the program administration and et cetera, and they just keep the interest, or they return the interest to the state.
They would need to return the interest to the state.
Is that written in the contract?
No, not specifically, but it's in the law. So by virtue of the fact that they're signing the contract, they're agreeing to follow the law. So that level of specificity is not in the contract, but it's in the law.
think in the state of Idaho, it probably was.
Member
not
Booth?
Right.
Specified in the law.
Right. Right. So they are, so by, yeah, I see what she's asking. So by virtue of the fact that they've agreed to follow the law as part of their agreement with you or with us, then they would need to follow the law for what we would result in the interest, accumulated in the return of that to the state. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Member Earl?
For some reason, I think, if I turn it off, that when I turn it on, it's going to go red. I don't know why. I've done that about 3 times today. And I don't know necessarily need a response, but if you want to, you can. I just think some of the biggest complaints or feedback that I've gotten from parents themselves that have received this scholarship was the lack of communication or the inefficiency of communication. To me, and I hope, wherever you are, Odyssey, right? That it's not just a little important. This is kind of a make or break it thing, because parents being able to get timely, right, information from someone, the program manager, and then being able to answer their questions, just having a Zoom meeting over and over and over again, instead of just putting together a fact sheet, right? I mean, I just hope they're more efficient than previously. And I know it was starting up a new program, and that often has those hiccups or whatever, but that's the biggest thing that I've heard from parents, is just that uncertainty, being told one thing and then another, and that changing, and then not really knowing what can or can't be used, which I think most families want to just stay within whatever the framework is. So Odyssey, that's like the biggest concern I have, is making sure there's clear communication, clear engagement with the parents. They've got the questions, answers, and how to do things. And if it's still uncertain, that there's a mechanism and a quick response back. So
Sure.
those are the things. And I did see, it looked like I saw those components in the bill, and not in the bill, but when I read through it, I was like, okay, I can
Scope of
see it
work.
here, the scope of work.
Terms and conditions.
Yep. So I'm hoping I think that's a big win for them to successfully do that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if I may,
Sure.
Chair, related to that particular point, we've tried to overly emphasize the fact that as part of their overall responsibility, and this would be for any vendor that was chosen, is that we disengage from even the parental liaison that Cassie Hayes has been doing, and emphasize that resolution with the parents has to be directly with the vendor, right? To try to even further demonstrate the direction or intent to remove government, if you will, from the processes, and allow the vendor that amount of latitude to meet the contract, but to do exactly what Board Member Earl has described directly with the parents. The how they do that is really up to them. If we find that they're not doing that, though, then it could lead to questions about, breach of contract or thing, because that is, to her point, is also, I think, articulated very well in the law, right? That this is a program that the vendor must ensure is between them and the parents. So, yeah.
Thank you. We've got Member Hall, and then we've got Member Brenton online.
I know we all understand this is a weighty matter. I don't think anybody understands more than Deputy Jones and our staff here at USPE. I don't think anyone's received more complaints than these guys. And so I just want to say, I believe, especially with you being, I think you hold a lot of responsibility here. And I think you've taken it very serious. Matter of fact, I think you've been very modest on how you've dealt with Odyssey up to this point. From what I hear, he grilled them up one side down the other. And I'm thankful to hear that, because I think with the experiences that you guys have had up to this point, it's necessary to try to get to a place where we have good faith in the company as we move forward. So we've trusted your leadership, to this point. We continue to trust you in this process and believe that you've done a good, thorough job. It hasn't been really mentioned I know Leanne sat on a committee, you know, and with this process and helping choose this company and other people. There were many people involved in this process, you know, to get it to this point. And so I just want to let you know, I do support this motion. I'm confident as we move forward, and trust your leadership that we're making a good decision here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Member Brenton?
Yes, I just want to say thank you for all the extra information and clarification. And I haven't had a chance to dive into the policy book yet. I'm just wondering, is there a
Right.
fact sheet on the UFA for us as board members? And does Odyssey have their own policy analysts that will be diving in to make sure they're in compliance with the law? I feel like with the UFA, I know, or the scholarship, that it's about parental rights and having the freedom, but we have so many guidelines for charter schools that they have to jump through and report. And is there going to be a process for the parents? And are there changes in the law from this year that we can see on reporting and what is acceptable to be paid for and what is not? Or is
Yes,
that not
Scott,
really
please.
our purpose? So.
No, so the answers to all of her questions are yes, with a little bit more specificity as it relates to they did demonstrate and ultimately led to the selection that they have those capabilities as you have described, to be very clear on, you know, what qualifies as a reimbursement, to be very clear on all these aspects that the board member just described, right? So the key though is they're not technically available because we don't have a contract yet in place. So I would say that should you, you know, if I sign the contract, that you would see that I feel confident that you would see those types of things from the vendor. Does that help answer her question?
Member Brenton?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Member Carey?
Thank you, Chair. You know, Deputy Jones, thank you for providing the information you did yesterday. And it did answer several of the concerns I had and those regarding accountability. But I have one question that I'm still struggling with, and you may have, you may be able to answer it, you may not be able to. But I had heard the same thing that the board member Hall did. I think we were together at the time, but that you really put Odyssey through a military type bunk inspection. But my question is this: why would any organization want to take over a program that was just declared unconstitutional, has probably a year to go administering this program under that cloud of uncertainty? I can't understand that. And I don't know if that came up in your discussion with them or if you have some thoughts on that, but if you could address that.
Sure. Through the chair, timing. At the time we were vetting and I just would like to clarify for everybody that I am equally mean to all vendors, right? I do not, I am mean, I am. And it was not just Odyssey, I would put anyone through it. You ask any vendor for anything, SISs, whatever, I am equally
Thorough.
mean to them.
Yes,
Yes. So, you know, in case that comes up in a court thing or something. Anyway, related to the specific question that board member Carey asked, at the time it wasn't clear what the judge was going to, whether there would be a stay thing. So timing wise, the process had taken place to do the recommendations. So my answer is, I think that's a question that's better answered by the vendor, right? I mean, if you look at the date that the CEO or president of it signed, it's well after the clarity was provided by the court system that, you know, a stay, if I'm doing the legal terms right, a stay was granted subject to the appeal process and then ultimately what the Supreme Court decides. So I believe they're well informed of where things are at currently in the judicial system. But I really do feel that your question, Board Member Carey, through the chair is better answered by the vendor, not by me. That's their decision, but I do believe it was an informed decision to enter into this contract based on the date that the president signed for thing. Does that help answer the question?
It does, Chair, a follow-up. So to the best of your knowledge, is there any hold harmless or provision in the contract that addresses if the program is deemed unconstitutional, would Odyssey be made whole or reimbursed for any costs that they incurred? Are you aware of any type of provision like that?
Up to that, through you, Chair, up to that point, up to the date that, and you know, it very well could be, and I'm trying not to guess what the Supreme Court will do. But if it was ruled that it was unconstitutional, then I would assume that there would be an order from the court on when to stop, sensations, cease and desist, whatever, or, or perhaps it is as of that date of the decision that the Supreme Court made. I don't know if there would be mitigating circumstances presented by both sides to the Supreme Court, either prior to or after the decision of the court. But pretty much the parameters are that up to the point where it's very clear that this is the last date of the program related to whatever decisions are making. Again, I can't, I'm not sure I can speculate on when that would be and what the conditions of it would be. If it's just a full stop here as this date, we would make them whole up to that point. But it really does depend on what the order is. The timing of it could be, we could be at the end of a fiscal year. We could be at the beginning of a fiscal year. So it's difficult for me to say that they would be held whole or to promise that in a public meeting, because I just don't know what I don't know. And that is, what are the conditions of the determination or the ruling by the court? I hope that helps. I don't know if I could be any more specific than that we would provide up to the point where the program ends, to make them whole. But beyond that, I just could not speculate or conjecture.
No, I understand that. Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to publicly humiliate Molly. She said, I can't hold it anymore. I thought we were going to vote. I got to step out. Now we have to pause. Okay. Member Green.
I'll fill the time with something maybe outside of this, but it has to do with some parents that might not have been reimbursed for some of their things from the ACE program before that went out. If you could email me or direct me to who I could talk to, I do have a couple of families that are needing to ask those questions on reimbursement.
Chair, if I may. Yes, absolutely. But I think this is important for everyone to note. It's a value add to this, that I feel confident that ACE has recorded or it will provide us data on where it stands with reimbursement process and appeal processes for existing customers. Now, does that, I can't guarantee that one particular family might not be on that list right now, but by all indications at this point, there should be a pretty good transition of information, always in the interest of protecting identity, PII, of where we currently stand, where families currently stand with ACE's perspective on their reimbursement requests, transferring over, should you, not being presumptive, should you approve the contract, and then they start on May 16th, that there would be that follow-up to reimbursements from the prior year or from this year. But yes, I can email you individually, board member, to do that, board member Green, to do that through the chair. So
and follow up.
But yeah.
And I think it's safe to presume that ACE will cover those expenses and not Odyssey, correct? Like that,
well,
because it falls
sure.
within the contract of when ACE was overseeing the program.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Chair, if I may. Well, so the answer is, well, the funding covers it. The timing of it though, so we have to get, this goes kind of back to what, I was talking about earlier, was as part of the transfer of authority between one vendor to the other, the money needs to come back from the previous vendor, then we provide the funding to the new vendor. They take that data and, you know, say yes for the reimbursements to it. Now, if you're asking questions about policy of reimbursements and those things, that's where we'll have to look closely at what the items are for. And too, that would be, to my understanding, up to the new vendor and their interpretation of the law as it applies to that too. So now I don't want parents out there going, well, now I'm not going to get reimbursed or no, I don't know that yet. You know, that has to be part of the transition and working closely from one vendor to the other, giving the data on what the reimbursements are for. And the new law went into effect on March 6th when the governor, I know that there's reimbursements that are still pending from before that.
And that's where this.
So that's where
yeah.
we have to get, you know, I don't want to come across as saying, well, people aren't going to get reimbursed, you know, for that. I believe they will be, but I also have to be, I'd be remiss if I didn't account for the fact that there is the new law that went into effect on March 6th. We know that there's reimbursements pending from before that, and we know that there's reimbursements being submitted and pending after that. And so because of that new law and the requirements of what can be reimbursed, for example, no more musical instruments, right? That's very specific in the law. So I don't want to speak I don't want to sound like, well, it's going to go bad, but I also don't want to make sure that parents aren't saying, well, I'm going to get reimbursed when it might be an item that it does not qualify that they bought or provided after March 6th. You know, is that fair? Or,
Yes.
you know, from the vantage point, it all will matter. And we did try to articulate that the two vendors have to work together to ensure as much clarity and in the transition, right, to facilitate the process. So ultimately, though, it is the funding that will be used for reimbursement on that. Yeah.
Yeah, any information that I could pass along to them, that if there's direct contacts that I can direct parents to, or websites, or, you know, just to help extend
Sure.
that help to them would be
This is,
awesome.
I
Thank
think,
you.
I think we're getting beyond the contract, but
Okay.
you know what I mean?
Always back.
Yeah. So.
Well, I think that's important because it does
Yeah.
go to the conditions of the contract. What she's asking, Chair, is pertinent to the contract, and it gives me just another opportunity to emphasize that should the board pass the contract and I sign it, it will be incumbent upon the vendor to communicate with those parents directly without us facilitating that, how the process will work for reimbursements.
Perfect.
I do plan on being equally mean about the whole thing. Okay. I
Does that
mean,
help, Emily?
no, and
Does that help?
honestly though, I do say that, but you know, I think you all know that we as staff and you as the board, we are very interested in making sure that the parents get served. You know, it's unfortunate that there's been some issues out there, but by gosh, we're really trying to do what's right in the interest of the parents. But we really have to emphasize that it's really incumbent upon the vendor to do so by way of the contract, if that's okay.
Thank you.
So, okay.
Looks like we have a final comment from Member Lear.
And my concern would be that was the point of this program as it was developed by the legislature. The
Sure.
board approves the contract. Then the parents and the parents' role is then with the vendor. And it's not your role to facilitate. And I know it's really hard for sometimes elected board members and certainly for educators that I know to not, it's hard. You say you're mean and harsh. I've seen every educator they want to help, they want to be
Sure.
facilitators, but it's not our role.
Right.
It's their role to work with that vendor, the parents, and get what they need. Otherwise, we are overstepping, the board and the board staff are overstepping our statutory role in this program.
Chair, and if I may, and hopefully board member Lear, based on what I've said, what you've read and reviewed in the contract, you can see that I am further emphasizing that is that the vendor has to own this, and that our role will be just that, is just the enforcement of the contract, and that is made abundantly clear that they own this going forward. So much so that I've made it very clear that we will disengage from the parental liaison after the transition occurs. We want to help along what Board Member Green was, Cassie and I'll continue to work, try to, because there's parents that are concerned that perhaps their applications didn't get processed far enough and those types of things. We will still try to do that to facilitate the transition. Once they start though, once that's done and we have those pieces in place, it will be incumbent upon the vendor to own this and to directly liaison, communicate, support, all those types of things with the vendor. I do understand the intent.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate that. Thank you, board members. Let's queue up this vote then. The motion before the board is that the board approve the contract with Primary Class DBA Odyssey. Let's go ahead and vote.
Brinton's a yes.
Member Brenton's yes. Member Reel?
Real is a yes.
She got back on.
Reel's a yes. Member Kelly, I believe, had to drop off. Board Member Davis, are you with us? Okay. So this passes 12 in favor, 1 in opposition, that being Member Bogus. Thank you, board members. We do have one additional contract that was pulled from the consent calendar. We have anybody who's willing to make a motion in either direction here? Member Bogus?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I would move that we approve the remaining items in the consent calendar. I forget the name of that contract offhand.
Well, the motion is to approve any remaining items. Do we have a second? Second. Is there any opposition? Online? Seeing none, that concludes the consent calendar